listen, this right here, it's it. It's over. It's done. Okay. We all knew it was going to happen, but I just want to make sure that we can reiterate the fact that this is where we are at. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when the NCAA is going to die. I know for a lot of you are probably thinking like, well, that's the biggest statement in the world. I wanted to make sure I could go through some of those specifics because it's a multi-front war. It's a multi-front battle. It's going to happen in many different ways. I want to make sure I can highlight how those are going to happen, where they're getting hit from, and so on. The fact that not only, like I said, a multi-front war, it's one of those things where in World War II, Hitler's big mistake was starting a war on two different fronts, starting a war on an Eastern front and starting a war on a Western front, when he should have just gone to war with one, finished that opponent, and turned around and went to the other. He started on two fronts, eventually got completely caved in on. And again, I think that unfortunately for the NCAA, they could only wish that they had two fronts, because currently I have at least what do I have? I have at least seven, well, 6 or 7 fronts that they're fighting on right now, and multiple other players who are joining the war to take them down. So we're going to go through that, kind of how the NCAA is going to die, what their current opponents are, because there are many opponents. And there was a huge ruling just came through just earlier today that, I mean, absolutely ginormous ruling that came through earlier today in relation to, factoring, athletes as employees. And again, it factors into, it has such unique language that, or such specific language that it basically states the fact that, like, hey man, it doesn't matter where you're at, doesn't matter what you're talking about. These are employees for multitudes of different reasons, how much money they make, whatever you're trying to say. That's not whether or not they're profitable. That's not an important designation. There are multiple reasons why. We're going to go through that here in a sec. All right. So from Reuters, and this is, like I said, this is big. This was just on the 31st, just a couple days ago. The NCAA is hit with lawsuits by Tennessee, in addition to adding Virginia, over student pay. So Tennessee and Virginia have sued the NCAA over its rules restricting compensation for student athletes, marking the first U.S. states to enter a long-running legal fight over players' compensation rights. It's important to remember with this too, and I heard that Joel Klatt say this before, and it'll get into the reasons why here. It's because of the big reason why this is happening right now is because of selective enforcement. I know a lot of you are thinking like, what do you mean by selective enforcement? Well, as an example, I heard Joel Klatt say this earlier on one of his shows, and it's such a great example. I'm going to use absolutely. I'm going to use it. It's Joel Klatt. He's one of the best names in college football. But he basically stated, he was like, okay, so here's the deal. Let's just say the speed limit's 35 miles an hour, and you drive 35 miles an hour, and everybody else around you is driving 50 miles an hour. So you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to drive 50 miles an hour. You eventually start driving 50 miles an hour, and then 60 miles into you all driving 50 miles an hour in a 35, somebody pulls you over and says, hey, you were going 50 in a 35. And they say, wait, what are you talking about? How far back was the speed limit, the speed limit sign? And they're going to be like, well, it doesn't matter. Well, it's like, well, everybody else is around me is going 50. Why'd you pull me over? It's like, listen, it doesn't matter. You're breaking the law. And that's what Tennessee was doing. Is unfortunately the big breakdown here, and all of this, the TLDR of this conversation is that you're not supposed to use name, image, and likeness payments as inducements, inducing somebody to make a decision to come over to you. Basically, what it means is that if your name, image, and likeness is worth $4 million and you pay $4 million, that's fine. If your name, image, and likeness for a left tackle is $70,000 and you pay them $700,000, that's an inducement. You can't get $700,000 of NIL value by selling, left tackle cleats or something like that. I'm just saying that's an example. But basically that's what's going on, is the fact that it's been the Wild West, and a lot of these mid-tier programs who can't compete from a structural perspective have been paying a lot, and even some of the top schools have been paying a lot too, to make sure these players come to them. Tennessee got popped for Nico I from California to come over to him, and Tennessee is like, we're not going to take this one. You guys are selectively enforcing this. This is BS. Everybody else is doing the same thing. Why'd you select us out? This is a bunch of crap. Well, continuing on with this article, let's see what the specifics of the lawsuit are. States filed the lawsuit in Knoxville, Tennessee federal court on Wednesday, accusing the college athletic governing body, the NCAA, of violating U.S. antitrust law with its rules controlling compensation for commercial use of athletes' name, image, and likeness. The NCAA is already facing similar lawsuits from current and former athletes seeking billions of dollars in damages over curbs on compensation for their participation in competitive collegiate sports. The new cases focus on an alleged NCAA restriction against NIL compensation opportunities as a recruiting tool. So it says here, student athletes should have more freedom over negotiating and earning money for their skills and ability. Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares, a Republican, said in a statement. Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti, also a Republican, in a statement said students shouldn't be left behind while everybody else involved prospers. And again, that is one of the big reason why this is all happening, spoken ad nauseum by a zillion different people. The big reason why this is all happening is because for the longest, I always want to make sure that I'm clear about this. Okay, who is Larry Fink? He had the smartest and most diabolical statement ever. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, the investment group. He had one of the most sincere, honest, correct, and diabolical statements I've ever heard in my entire life. And if you're a fan of the old world of college sports, I'm going to put you into the same room as Larry Fink for this respect. Here's what I mean. So Larry Fink basically said, he was like, the thing about it is markets like consistency. Unfortunately, democracy is a little bit of controlled chaos. So markets kind of like dictators. Markets kind of like dictators because they know what to expect. Again, markets like consistency because then they know how to factor in costs, how to factor in this, how to factor in that. Freedom, as it turns out, actually is a little bit messy. It requires some destruction. It requires some, negotiation. It's not always consistent. There's different players. There's different things here and there. Boom, boom, boom. However, with a dictator, you generally get to kind of understand, what to expect. It's a known, what a lot of people say this in geopolitics, that person's a known quantity. You know what to expect. You don't know what to expect. Certain people, it's like, I have no idea what to expect. That's a loose cannon. That person could go this way. That person could go that way. I don't really know. I'm just saying that that's an example. So if you're thinking like, which political candidate does a certain foreign entity want, they probably want the more understood candidate. They want the person who they kind of know what to expect, or potentially they want a weak one. But again, that's geopolitics. We're going to move that over here. But I'm basically saying, though, is that the old world of college football, a lot of people liked it because they're like, you know what? As much as it was the fact that the NCAA was completely screwing over athletes in terms of their compensation, I knew what to expect. And that's the big difference between the younger generation and older generation. Not necessarily a younger generation, older generation, but a pro change, pro fairness, and a pro appeal to authority, appeal to tradition group. That's really the two people are battle. It's the whole okay boomer thing. It's not necessarily old people with that. There's some old guys who are like, yeah, this is completely ridiculous. There's some young people who are like, man, remember the time when college football was a lot more, or college sports was a lot more, secure. It was better. Like, well, first of all, the sport's never been better right now. Specifically, football has never been better. There was legitimately 8 teams this year in terms of parity, 8 teams that had a realistic shot at winning the national championship. Whether or not that's going to happen on a year-to-year basis, I don't know the answer to that question. But I do know that the old model where you had this huge dictator who was getting by with a lot of shady operations. Oh yeah, well you yourself, the athlete, you are doing this for the love of the game, but we're just going to sit back and make all the money in the world off of your name, image, likeness, your ACLs, this and that. Oh, you get injured, you have to figure that out after you leave. Again, there's lots of things here. The athletes, in terms of their maybe not retirements, maybe not getting like what's the term I want to say here, like a retirement, a pension or something like that. But at the same time, like if you leave college, no more athletic, no more medical coverage for you. There's lots of things like that the NCAA was getting by with, and schools were getting by with under the NCAA's purview, that I think were kind of BS. And I think that right now what's happening is a lot of these rules, especially in terms of employee classification, especially in terms of your name, image, and likeness and monetization, especially in terms of how many times we were getting compensated, we weren't. You were controlling us, you weren't. There's lots of things like that people are starting to question. People, meaning the people that are important, that actually have the ability to throw some weight around in this realm. So Continuing on, NCAA members have steadfastly supported the prohibition on impermissible recruiting contacts, booster involvement in recruiting prospects, and the use of NIL offers as recruiting inducements. Very important, the statement said from the NCAA. The states that have asked the court to issue a temporary restraining order by February 6th, the day before the signing period begins for football in NCAA's D1, the highest level of college athletes, the highest level, and if we're being honest here, the majority of the money. I heard as an example, I heard recently that football makes 80% of the basically the revenue for universities from an athletics perspective, and of the top 19 universities, they account for 75% of the viewership. So it basically means is like 19 football schools account for 60% of all of the revenue made across all sports and all universities in the entire country. That's absolutely shocking. Following a 2021 US Supreme Court ruling, the NCAA began allowing current students, athletes to make deals with third-party vendors that use their name, image, and likeness. The new lawsuit accused the NCAA of, quote, trying to stop NIL market from functioning, including in the recruitment process for new students. The legal team representing Tennessee and Virginia include attorneys from the conservative-leaning law firm Consovoy McCarthy. The firm has represented some Republican-led states in lawsuits over regulatory and other matters. In California, a related trial is scheduled for January 2025 among current and former NCAA or former students who have also sued the NCAA over name, image, and likeness compensation roles. A group of states and the U.S. Department have separately sued the NCAA over restrictions imposes on some transfer students' eligibility to play for another team at their new school. A judge has issued an injunction temporarily pausing the curbs. And then again, here we see the case of the state of Tennessee and Commonwealth of Virginia versus the NCAA for plaintiffs. This is, like I said, this is happening right now. There's multiple lawsuits. I want actually to get through some of the specifics here because it is crazy when you see this really quickly here. So let's go to stop share. All right, now I don't know how I'm going to share this one. We're gonna try this real quick. Right there. So current threats to the NCAA. There's just the legal realm. Again, like I said before, we were talking about the death of the NCAA. Just from the legal perspective, there's currently 5 lawsuits / legal cases they're going up against. One here was House versus NCAA, talking about TV revenue for 14,000 student athletes. House, I believe, was a former tennis player there. The National Labor Relations Board versus the NCAA and USC, classifying football and basketball players as employees. That's a specific issue here that we're going to kind of address there. So that's another one here. Another one is an NCAA appeal of a Pennsylvania legal effort to pay players wages for time. How often, they spend 30 hours a week on this. They need to be paid for hourly wage, blah, blah, blah. That's also currently happening. In addition to plaintiff Chubba Hubbard and others versus the NCAA for damages from Power 5 conferences. That one is important because it affects all Power 5 conferences from a historical perspective, including the the Pac-2, Pac-12 2 teams. So those assets that they have, some of that might have a chunk of change taken out of it. And the last but not least here is the Dartmouth versus the NLRB about employee classification for basketball players. That actually has come to a close with a ruling that just happened, which I'm letting you know right now is not going to go the way that the NCAA wants it to at all. We are going to go ahead and share our screen here because we see the fact that they're employees. The National Labor Relations Board rules that Dartmouth's men's basketball players are employees. This is extremely important. We're going to go through the big reason why here. On Monday, the National Labor Relations Board declared that Dartmouth players can hold an election to unionize. The landmark ruling could shatter the NCAA's amateurism model. That right there, that's it. It's just going to shatter it. It's over. Everything's done. Okay. They are absolutely positively going to be just destroying the NCAA. It is what it is. On Monday, the NLRB issued NLRB. I'm an HR employee, so NLRB issued a landmark ruling that could shatter the NCAA's amateurism model, as if it wasn't already shattered anyway. Dartmouth's men's basketball players are considered university employees under U.S. labor law and therefore are eligible to unionize. Think about that. A small private school in New Hampshire had a ruling based on their basketball players, a sport that doesn't even make any money. They even mentioned the fact that it doesn't make very much money They are going to be the straw that broke the camel's back with the NCAA. Quote, because Dartmouth has the right to control the work performed by Dartmouth's men's basketball team, and the players perform that work in exchange for compensation. This is crazy. They actually don't even get scholarships. I find that the petition for basketball players are employees with the meaning of the National Labor Relations Act, with the 26-page, unquote, with the 26-page decision reviewed by Front Office Sports, read. Quote, additionally, I find that the asserting jurisdiction would not create instability in labor relations. Accordingly, I shall direct an election in the petitioned for unit, unquote. The case was the first filed in September of 2023 by a local chapter of the Service Employees International Union. I'm telling you, I actually used to be in a union too. I would always get these letters. They would always be like, we had to fight, brothers and sisters. And I'm like, I don't even know what the hell that means. But again, the Service Employees International Union, a lot of these services are allying, and this is a service. I mean, it's technically an entertainment, but you know what I'm trying to say here. It's an important thing with the state of New Hampshire. A virtual hearing took place in October that saw witness testimony from current players and athletic department officials. The ruling touched on several common themes considered during the hearing, including the amount of control Dartmouth exerts over athletes and compensation they receive, even if not mandatory, that constitutes them as employees. Ivy League athletes do not receive athletic scholarships like other D1 members of D1 programs. But the NLRB regional director found that the other forms of compensation they received, like apparel, were enough. The lack of profitability did not appear to be a deterrent from the NLRB declaring the players employees. That right there, that sentence right there, is going to catapult college sports into a world that we have no idea what it's going to look like. Representatives from the NCAA, Ivy League, and Dartmouth did not immediately respond to requests for comment. What's next? The Dartmouth team will have the opportunity to hold a union election, though a specific date hasn't been set. Dartmouth's administration has 10 business days to file an appeal of the ruling. The school undoubtedly so. Allowing this ruling to stand would spell the end of the NCAA's business model of athletes not being university employees. If the appeal is filed, the election would still go forward and the results would be publicized. In the meantime, the National Labor Relations Board appeal process would begin. The board usually consists of 5 people, 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans under the Biden administration. However, there's currently a vacancy in one of the Republican seats. At least 3 board members would have to agree on a decision, which could take several months. The appeal process could continue beyond that, however, to a circuit court and ultimately to the Supreme Court. And I want to make sure I bring in the help of my dear friend, Mr. Matt Brown, right now, because Mr. Matt Brown is going to give us a good context for this, for how this is going to affect all, and I mean like all of college sports is going to be affected by this. The NLRB Dartmouth decision reiterates, quote, and we already read this, the profitability of any given business does not affect the employee status of the individuals who perform work for that business. It doesn't matter if a sport, quote, loses money. They are an employee based on the relation you have with them, based on the relation between the control of the university and so on. The NLRB also found that even though Dartmouth men's basketball players don't get an athletic scholarship, the various other benefits they earn from playing, shoes, tickets, etc., constituted compensation. If that's the standard, surely that would include virtually all D1 athletes, D2, D3. I'll tell you, this is getting to the point where if they actually push this to the logical end, like, do NAIA athletes get tickets for their family members? Does that count as compensation? You control, you compensate. Listen. This right here, it's it. It's over. It's done. Okay, we all knew it was going to happen, but I just want to make sure that we can reiterate the fact that this is where we are at. All right, guys, that is it for me. I am going to make sure, like I said, I'll cut this up into some videos. If you want me to get anything you want in the in terms of a video to be made, get in the comments. Let me know. I appreciate all of you guys so much. But that'll be it for me, guys. I'm tired. I'm going to go to bed here, but I'll see you guys later. I am out.